there's people that I've met that are the CEO of some of the biggest Fortune 500 companies in the world. And then there's some people that are maybe newcomers to the country, just trying to get their footing here coming in, right? And there's gems to be taken away from them, no matter what kind of walk of life that they're coming from. And I've learned that in and outside of the kitchen.
Welcome to the Reflect On podcast, where we embark on inspiring conversations filled with truth, vulnerability, and, well, anything else that'll help us learn, grow, and live better lives. I'm your host, Kevin P. Murphy. Thank you so much for embarking on this reflection journey with me today. Now let's get right into it. It's hard to think of many better art forms than that in the culinary industry, and food is one of the most universal things that applies to all of us as human beings. And this episode is about how that incredible art form can be translated into the artistry of life. Today's reflection is with Imrun Texeira. Imrun is a highly sought after chef that is trailblazing new paths of uniqueness into the culinary world. He has trained at the former #1 ranked restaurant in the world, competed on multiple TV series including Top Chef Canada and Chopped, and been recognized as Canada's top 30 under 30 in the hospitality leader space. Imrun is inspired by his fondest memories, multicultural roots, and teachings that span all around the world to bring forth culinary adventures that embody art in its truest form. In this episode, Imrun discusses how emotionality of his artistry is what makes it beautiful. We have a deep conversation on what the authenticity of art really is and what it embodies, which includes the perpetual conflict of creating things only for yourself or creating them for an audience. We also discussed how uniqueness and disruption are required for progress, and that a sustainable world is one where we invest in people. Imrun is a brand ambassador for the Burnt Chef Project. What Imrun shared about it and his own mental health journey opened my eyes up a lot to the culinary industry, the hospitality industry, and mental health as a whole. This conversation with Imrun Texeira is a fantastic one. So thank you, as always, for spending time with us today. And I hope you enjoy this episode with Imrun Texeira. So, Imrun Texeira, absolutely amazing to see you again. It's been, I'm trying to actually think.
Give or take 10, 12 years, man.
Yeah, something like that. It's pretty incredible. We were actually just talking about this before this, but one of the things I'm most curious about with you is what I would call maybe the art of food. And when I think of that word art, for me, it's an expression of something within you that comes onto the world. Even if it's just for you. For me, I do a lot of writing, journaling, things like that. And sometimes that's just for me. But there's other mediums of art where I see it's for the world to learn and for yourself to reflect on and continue learning. I think food is such a universal medium for that and that form of art. So one of my first thoughts, curiosities, and questions is, how do you bring the emotionality and the expression of art into food? How does it come from within you, and how does that process work? And what is it like to bring it into something that's on such a universal stage, like something like food?
Yeah, so definitely a loaded question. When you're thinking about the artistry of food and the creating of dishes and or menus, there's so many different moving parts into it, right? Where for me or for most people in that kind of realm of creativity and creating said experiences or dishes, you're pulling in inspiration from so many different types of arenas of life. Where for me, maybe it's something that's more just nostalgic for me, if it's about childhood memories or flavors I grew up with. So things that mean a lot to me on different levels as like a sole individual, which might resonate with me and my close people, like my close friends and family, a lot more than say the average person, because those memories mean a lot to me. And then it's all about conveying that message as well when you're explaining what the inspiration was behind said dish. And that can be something that you see in the top fine dining restaurants in the world, or it can be an ice cream, or it can be like an everyday sandwich, right? So that's what I think is beautiful, is that there's so many different layers and levels to the food world. And like you said, it is such an international kind of language or common ground, if you will. We all have to eat. Everyone around the world is always looking for, one, the nourishment, but the excitement around it, right? Where And I was having this conversation the other day is that whenever I'm meeting up with new, old friends, business meetings, you name it, it's normally around food or drink, right? It's just such a really cool, like, common ground for people to break bread over, if you will, to connect. So having that kind of like those different inspirations coming from these different realms, which is really cool because now I'm creating multi-course menus on a consistent basis. So a lot of it's pulling inspiration or memories from years ago, or maybe as of recent from recent connections. But then it's just about what do you want to say with the food? So then highlighting maybe my background, my culture, maybe cultures or things that I've come into connection with as of recent. So there's so many different ways that that creativity or that artistry can come into it. And that's from just like the background of it, maybe from the flavors that are being presented in a dish. Or if you're then thinking about, say, the presentation side of it, if you've seen the massive growth through the world of social media in general and the ideology of how your eyes eat first, then you're thinking about the artistry of how the dish even looks. So thinking about how the presentation side of it, and that's coming into maybe more the mainstream idea of what artistry is or what it is to create art. So you're looking at it from more of just the visual aspect of it. But for me, it's the whole rounded picture. It's just like, what are you trying to say with the dish? Because there's so like it's very I think food can be political based on how you can take it, right? Showcasing the flavors, the techniques, and what you're showcasing, right? Where you see a lot of stuff, especially for me coming from more of the fine dining world, you're always seeing the same kind of cultures, the same kind of flavors always being represented because it's those cultures and those cuisines and those types of people or demographics that have only been able to maybe afford to eat in those establishments. So now being based in Toronto, being one of the most, if not the most multicultural city and or country in the world, you're starting to see a wider demographic of people with maybe the money or wanting that kind of experience and then seeing themselves represented in those realms. So for me to now pull in flavors from my background, my travels, and from these different corners of the world to bring it into those highest realms that we've never really seen that representation in this country before. So for me, it's very invigorating to showcase the unique ingredients or the unique techniques or the flavor combinations in my own artistic take and having that representation because it's something that's never been done. So from a business standpoint, okay, it's amazing because you're doing something that you can't find anywhere else. And for me, it's invigorating because it's something that's never been done. Maybe I'm not reinventing the wheel because these flavors, ingredients, and whatnot and techniques have been around for centuries, but you're bringing something completely different to the table. So for me, it's cool to know that I'm doing something that's so unique and different, and I'm able to really weave a story into it and thinking about the artistry from every single level. If it's the story behind it, the inception of the idea that came together to create the dish or the experience, the ingredients where they come from, and then down to like the raw state of how it tastes and how it actually looks on the plate. So it's really cool to take in all those different levels and layers to create something that's very simplistic at the end of the day is, hey, here's a dish, let me nourish you.
I love how you looked at the inspiration to your past, whether that past was 10 minutes ago or 10 years ago or beyond, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to zero in on something a little bit that you mentioned there. It seems like it's a counterintuitive forces sometimes. And I don't necessarily mean that in a toxic way, but the battle between the visceral and emotional connection that you have when you're cooking food, performing that art for yourself or publicly, how do you battle with that, which is, what I would see as, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I would see that as the most authentic inspiration of why you do what you do. How do you battle that and mirror it with the, okay, well, how do I impress everyone else around me? Or how do I make
Mm-hmm.
sure that this is actually good and received by the masses, or something that everybody likes, or something that will land in fine dining in the
Mm-hmm.
most traditional sense, which isn't necessarily a good or a bad thing. But how do you
Yeah.
battle with that sort of the interconnectedness, the visceral emotion, and then the influences from the outside while you're performing that
Mm-hmm.
art?
If you look at art from every single spectrum, if it's paintings on a wall, if it's fashion designers, you look at art in on any level, but at the highest realms, people are not creating it for everybody to love it in a sense, where they're creating it as a self-expression where, hey, for me, it's just like, I love these flavors. I enjoy these techniques. I like the science behind it and how I can manipulate these everyday products into something completely different. I'm not one to create something for the wow factor, like, hey, this is cool and wild, but it's going to taste like shit. For me, that doesn't make sense. So I definitely want the flavors to resonate with people in a very positive light. But at the same time, I'm creating it because it means something to me. So I'm putting myself out there where it's not me conforming to other people's wants and desires. And there are restaurants or business models that lean towards that way. But for me, I didn't want to ever get into this line of work where and that's why I've started my business without having people saying, hey, we want this, we want you to do this. And yeah, there's great money and whatnot to be made out of that. But as someone who is highly creative, I want to have that full creative freedom. So one, being able to make sure that the flavors and the nourishment is there, but at the same time, this is a self expression of my creativity and my love and my passion for what I do. And knowing that, hey, maybe it's not going to be someone's favorite, but I know from me as an individual, I love everything I put out. And that alone is enough confidence for me to go out into the market and to push that out, knowing that if I love this 110%, at least 1% of the people are going to like that. When you're thinking of creativity in those realms of arts, people are looking for something new, something unique, something different, right? Where it gets a little monotonous, a little boring, eating the same thing or seeing the same kind of fashion trends come out or the same styles of paintings. That's why the people that have really transcended borders have done something completely different and unique. And there's always going to be a desire for that. And that's part of the culture. That's what actually makes the world go around, right? So for me to be a small piece of that big puzzle of changing the culture of how things can really be perceived and doing something different for me is, I think, the best part.
Yeah, I totally agree. It sounds like you value the currency of creativity over the actual monetary currency as an
Hmm.
example, and saying, look, if I could have money as a medium and make it in the more already trailblazed space, then I can do that with the skills that I may have. But,
Hmm.
am I going to be truly happy if I do
Well,
that way,
and
expressing my
that's it.
creativity?
And that comes down to the individual, right? Because there's a lot of people within my realm where it's just like, hey, you know what? We're not going to pave a new way. We know what works. Maybe we can elevate it in a different way or just elevate it in general. But we know the demographic of people are going to be there to support our business, which is fine, right? And I've always wanted to be one to go against the grain. I've never liked doing what everyone else has done, and especially when it comes to techniques and flavors, it gets boring doing the same thing over and over. So always trying to push the envelope, right? For me is a big part. And for the people that have transcended those borders to trailblaze these new techniques, styles, and so on, no matter what industry it is, there's a level where you're in a whole nother realm. You're in that higher 1%. And then that's where the money matches up with that passion. That's why you see the best cars in the world, the best designer handbags, or whatever it is in the highest realms of art. That's where the high price ticket comes with it as well, because there's that value put on that kind of creativity and that passion to create something of that excellence where, yeah, you can find your mediocre, your good level, like mid-level product, but it's nothing special about it, right? Everyone can get it or whatever, where it's just those like unique things. Like if you're thinking about different types of like supercars that have come out, there's only so many made, or there's like a sneaker drop and there's only so much and different people have collaborated on it. It's those things that make it so special. And that's where those higher price points come at it. So from a business standpoint, okay, it's really cool that you can monetize something that's so special and unique, to have that kind of control over the supply and demand. But then same time, when you get into those realms, then you're networking with people that are on the same wavelength as you.
Mm.
So if you're thinking like, maybe I'm not always going to be mixing with people, say in the culinary realm that are pushing to that kind of extent, but I'm going to meet people that are maybe in marketing or in advertisements or that are artists in different ways. So we're not maybe in the same lane, but we're on the same kind of track. We're all trying to push things in a new way. So I've met a lot of different people within recent times that are so out there when it comes to bringing creativity to their own realm, and it's changed my perspective on how to go about different things. So yeah, maybe it's not as concrete as I can just copy and paste that kind of technique or that perspective, but it just changes your viewpoint a little bit, and that's how things can really just explode in different ways. And that's why I love being in that bubble of people that are really trying to push the boundaries, because it just can open up the doors for amazing, beautiful things to like to come out of it that probably haven't happened before.
So brilliantly said. I mean, that's what really art is it's a collection of, and generalizing, of course, but I believe it's a medium of basically taking in all these resources that you have or memories or insights through a lot of what you're saying and then making it whatever you feel is right or creative or expressive or whatever it may be. And it makes a lot of sense the way you spelled that out, that disruption is necessary for innovation, right?
Hmm.
It's important to be creative and go against the grain. You're mirroring something actually a little bit or dancing around it in a great way, something I was curious about and wanted to know more. This is actually a quote from you. It's a part of a passage where you were trying to inspire others, and I love it. Continuously experiment and innovate, pushing the boundaries of taste and presentation. Above all, remain open to learning from everyone. For the path to becoming a culinary virtuoso is an evolving, lifelong commitment to your craft. I know that was obviously for the culinary world, but
Hmm.
how do you believe, and if so, how can you translate that to everyday life? Do you believe that? And
Hmm.
do you do that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely done for everyone if they know it or not. I've made a point of being present in that kind of like state of mind of knowing that these instances or this knowledge, these little gems are being dropped, because I'm very lucky to be in a realm where I'm mixing and meeting hundreds of people on a consistent basis from all different walks of life, from different cultures, from different backgrounds. And the common ground is food, hospitality, etc. These are all things that are ingrained in our everyday life. As I mentioned earlier, we're all eating, we're all hosting friends and family, we're all going out. So a lot of these things are transferable skills when I look at it from a career standpoint. But coming, say, out of that, as you're asking, into everyday life, like there's people that I've met that are the CEO of some of the biggest Fortune 500 companies in the world. And then there's some people that are maybe newcomers to the country, just trying to get their footing here coming in, right? And there's gems to be taken away from them, no matter what kind of walk of life that they're coming from. And I've learned that in and outside of the kitchen. I've learned techniques from people that I thought were junior people coming out of culinary school, and they've said one or two things that maybe this is the way they've grown up doing it, or they saw this cool video or da da da. And I think about it, I'm like, damn. And there's techniques or ideas or perspectives. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take this and use that for the rest of my life. And then it's the same thing for outside of those realms as well, where working in kitchens, you're meeting people from all different age groups. I first started working at 14, and the guy working with me on the line or in the dish pit, he was a 45, 50-year-old Cambodian man. And he was telling me experiences from for him leaving that country, emigrating across the world, and eventually coming to Canada. And you just hear stories. Yeah, we're not really talking about how can we become the best dishwasher, but he's talking to me more about life, and he's lived three, four of my lifetimes already, right? So
Mm.
taking those little nuggets in, and it's just knowing that no matter who these people are, there's something to be learned. And it's that kind of respect that you have to give these people, because there's so much that can be taken away. So yeah, they might not be the top of their craft, or maybe the top in my world by any means, right? But there's something that they can offer of value. And that's why I've always had that respect for people at the top of the pyramid and at the bottom. No matter where you as an individual stand, there's something that can be taken away positively from all these interactions. And it's about knowing that and creating the space to do so, and not dismissing those possible interactions to happen.
That's so beautifully said. You actually introduced and you were commenting a little bit around it before, but I'm really curious in how what you just said relates to the culture and the interconnectedness of our culture through food. You are, to me, Imran, a shining example and a culmination of that. I mean, you think of your background of and please correct me if any of this is mistaken, but a Punjabi father. Your mother was born in East Africa, I believe. They obviously had a great deal of time in England, but you were born in Canada. And not
Hmm.
only that, you've actually trained around the world in different areas and embroidered that sense of culture, not just from your history, but also through your active learning process and your openness to learn. And when I think about that in you, I think of it as a culmination of culture. How do you see that, the culmination of culture? How important is that to you, not just with food, but with life as well in our world?
It's very important. This is my identity as an individual. This is our identity as a country, if you think about it, right? Where everyone asks me, oh, like what cuisine, like what do you focus on? What's your specialties? What are the cuisines that you represent? Or who are you as an individual? I wasn't born and raised in India or in East Africa or in England. I have strong ties to all those countries, but I'm born and raised in Canada. I'm the first person in my family to be born on Canadian soil and raised here. And I'm very proud of that. And I like to represent that, not just here in Canada, but especially when I'm traveling overseas, especially when it comes down to for work. You're in such multicultural kind of spaces. When you think of kitchens or the hospitality environment as a whole, you're mixing and working with people from every corner of the earth. So I always like to represent Canada. But then when it comes down to like my food, like I think it would be easier. But I have a lot of friends that born and raised in France, they're French 10 generations back, or Italian or Mexican. I'm like, you know what? It would have been beautiful to have such a strong background of culture and history like that. But that's not the case for me. So I've had to really carve out something different. And that's why I love what I do now from a career standpoint, and the menus and the flavors that I showcase on my dishes is that one, it represents me having such a mixed background, but this is, I think, the modern lens of what the Canadian scene is, if it's food or not. It's so multicultural, and to showcase those different flavors, those different techniques and representation from different cultures from around the world, it represents me, one, as an individual, but also Canada as a whole. And I don't feel that it's really been showcased on a massive scale, because we are the most multicultural country in the world, and to showcase that in the levels of gastronomy, for me, it's very invigorating. But then at the same time, I feel that that's the true representation of myself, because a lot of people are like, oh, why don't you, it's easier for you to market yourself as maybe being a South Asian chef trying to maybe modernize Indian food, or why don't look at really specify in a certain region of Africa that your family's from, or even look at doing British food. I'm like, I do to an extent. I pull in all those notions or inspirations from those cultures, but I still have that imposter syndrome around it because I didn't grow up in those realms, right? So I take my own inspirations from those cultures based on my upbringing or my travels back to those countries, but doing a complete different interpretation of it. But I feel that is the true embodiment and representation of one, who I am, but what it is also to be Canadian.
It's so beautiful. It, like we were talking about earlier, it is a universal language in the one of food. And part of me thinks of it, and I do apologize, I'm clearly an amateur in the space, of course, and everything, but it reminds me of something that I wish we could culminate that universality with almost all aspects of our cultural differences and uniquenesses and backgrounds. But that's clearly not the case in the world
Mm-hmm.
today. It's obviously much more progress needs to be made in the sense of translating it to something that's just so easy, like food as a universality. But it doesn't mean that we can't learn from something like you just mentioned and your
Mm-hmm.
story, in the sense of different backgrounds, different learnings, being open, understanding what other people are or what they're going through or how they like to express themselves, using that to build up your life instead
Mm-hmm.
of using it to tear down the lives of others.
That's it.
I think that's what I'm taking from this and
Mm-hmm.
from the food aspect of it. And I think it's a more beautiful art than I've given it credit for, to be honest, in life. So it's wonderful how you're showcasing yourself like that, Imran. It kind of comes on the heels of something I wanted to talk and I was most interested almost about with you, which is your your involvement and role as an ambassador to the Burnt Chef project. From what I've researched and understood about that, I think that's a beautiful initiative. For those who don't know, it is from what I gather, and again, please feel free to correct me on this. They call it the Burnt Chef, and what I saw it as the Burnt Chef is because of it associates obviously with burn, but also the word burnout, right?
Hmm.
And that in the industry and putting some of the stigmas under the spotlight in a beautiful way to shine that on mental health. And it leads me to a question of your association with that, which is what do you think is the most misunderstood aspect of health, well-being, and mental health in the culinary or hospitality industry?
I think it's the lack of importance that we've put on that for forever. Obviously, being part of a massive movement, if you will, around the main mission of the Burn Chef Project is breaking the stigma of mental health within the food and hospitality industry. Right, this has been problems that have been around for decades, forever, before my time, during my time, and it's still going on. I was invigorated and inspired when I first heard about the project and the stories behind it and the people coming together. I've always grown up being taught from my mother or just like my close friends and family saying that if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. I
Mm.
feel that things are a little black and white because if you are on the sidelines watching it, you're just as bad as letting it just happen, right? So for me, I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to lean into this 110%. Let me actually be part of the solution of creating maybe safe grounds for people to speak on about the problems and creating safe places for people that are maybe in crisis or need help and pushing them to the right arenas to seek those services. Because I'm a chef. I'm not a doctor by any means, right? So I might not have all the answers, but I will create the spaces for people to talk about some problems that they might have going on and hopefully push them in the right places to get the help, the assistance, or the guidance they need. This is something that has never been a priority, unfortunately, within the food and hospitality realm. And for, I think, one of the most beautiful areas to work in and probably one of the biggest international job markets in the world. We've lost a lot of good people to burnout, to stress, to drugs, addictions, to unfortunate suicide as well, right? Because of the stress factors of our industry and the way that people have been treated. So one showcasing the problems that have been swept under the rug for so long. And the industry has done its own job in doing so before, during COVID, and it's really shown us a spotlight on the big problems. But now it's about what can we actually do about combating the problems and helping the people that need the help, and then maybe teaching the people that are running these institutions on how to create safer places for it. Because at the end of the day, these hotels, these restaurants, these spas, these retirement homes, they're going to come and go, but they're always going to be needed. People are going to love to go out to eat. People are going to travel for business or for pleasure. So these avenues of work or careers, like they're always going to be there. So why not think about the people that are actually working in these environments? We've talked about sustainability forever. If it's around climate change, if it's around maybe more food based, if you're thinking about the products you're using, about the amount of plastic or waste, whatever. But I think we have to really think about it from like the tip of the iceberg. It's like think about the people within the infrastructure, within these institutions. If we're not thinking about the sustainability of our bodies and our minds, who cares how much plastic we're using on the job sites or the other million things when it comes down to sustainability? We got to think about and put the people first. And those are the people that are going to, one, just have these institutions and these establishments running for 10 times longer, hopefully 10 times better, and keeping these systems in place to actually make things better down the line. So I feel that there's so many different like things that have contributed to the problems, but it's maybe the glorification over the wrong kind of traits that we thought was super cool. And maybe media plays into it, who knows, but the glorification of being, I would say this, the famous saying of chefs are the new rock stars. So you're thinking about the glorification of the long hours, the late night partying, the drugs, the alcohol. it's not really sustainable to a job where you're working on your feet or mixing with people and working these high pressure and high intense arenas, right? For hours on end. When you're thinking about working in some of the best restaurants or the most highly acclaimed spaces within that realm, I always like to translate this to kids or people maybe that aren't in that industry. You work in, say, the best restaurant in the world. Like you playing sports at the highest level, if it's the NHL, if it's the EPL, the MLB, it's that kind of level. Unfortunately, the pay scale is not there, but the pressures are because you're cooking for some of the most important people in the world, and that pressure to always be perfect. You're working within such a hard pressurized system, but yet we've never been taught the coping mechanisms to deal with that. Where these athletes, they're getting the perfect diets, they're getting sports psychologists to work with, they're getting massages. Why are we not putting that importance onto us working in those realms? So I'm really trying to, like, I'm on a mission to really change that notion that chefs aren't the new rock stars, chefs are the new athletes. And you and I, we had that connection for decades now, playing high level sports, and I still treat my body and mind the same way of creating that space for my mental sanity and my mental space and really making sure that is a priority for myself, but at the same time my body. If I'm working 16 18-hour days and I'm lifting heavy stuff, I'm working in hot rooms, I'm working with sharp tools or heavy machinery, I want to make sure that one, obviously my body and my mind is there in place to support that work. So I make sure that my brain is healthy, that my mental health is in a good space, but at the same time my body, I want to make sure that I'm limber, that I'm strong enough, I'm stretching. And that's how we're going to find years and years of high levels of success in this realm. Otherwise, you will burn out, your body and mind will get destroyed. And that's without the other toxic problems in there in general. That's just the day-to-day grunt work of that industry, right? So you want to set yourself up for success. And I feel those are the traits and notions that we should really be showcasing the most. Is this is what we should be prioritizing, and then creating the realms for us to work without those unneeded pressures and toxic traits. And I think even more beautiful things will come out of those spaces down the line.
How would you evaluate your mental and holistic health journey through the culinary experience?
Yeah, it's been a roller coaster, right? And that's not because yes, that's in part to the industry that I work in, but I think that's just life in general, right? There's peaks and valleys. There's times where maybe my mental well-being was put on the back burner because other things had to take a priority, and maybe now or other parts of my time in my life, it was the complete opposite. So it's about embracing each chapter of life, each peak and each valley for what it is, but then having the skill sets to combat and to support those different parts of your life, right? Because when you are at your lows, you want to have the right skill set to support yourself. If it's as an individual or if you're part of a team, if it's your family or if it's your colleagues at work, right? You want to be able to have the right tools and the skill sets to support that. But then at the same time, you want to know that when you are in the limelight or you're at those peaks, you have the right skill set as well, not to fall into maybe some of those bad realms where, especially for me, working within food media and doing the TV shows, when the spotlight is on you, you want to make sure that you can control that. Because as we've seen in media for years, a lot of people, when they get into those realms of money, success, and fame, they can fall into very dark holes. And unfortunately, we've lost a lot of bad people, or we've lost a lot of amazing people, sorry, to a lot of bad things. So knowing and having that skill set for the top and bottom, for the inevitable highs and lows of our life is crucial. And I make sure that's an importance for me. And it's an ongoing journey. I'm not perfect. Not every day is perfect. I don't feel 100% every day mentally when I wake up and or physically, but it's about knowing what I need to do and making that a priority. Because I know for long-term growth as an individual or professionally, that's what needs to be done. As long as I'm moving 1% forward to be better every day, that compound interest, if you will, is only going to give you amazing returns down the line.
It's incredible, man. Thank you so much for sharing that and reflecting that way. I have a couple of final questions for you, but first, I just want to acknowledge you, Imran. Your openness, your ability to learn, your journey thus far is one of inspiration for others, and It's not because you've been on, Top Chef Canada or things like that, in my opinion. I think that's a great medium to showcase it. But I
Hmm.
think it's because of your character and your authenticity behind the scenes when the cameras are off. You can tell that that's something that you really have come to value. And I think that it's a beautiful thing and it's going to propel you so much further. And you're just really, really inspiring. Although it's been afar for a while, and from me, it's just really inspiring. So I appreciate you, what you're
Appreciate it.
doing. Before we jump into the final questions, how else can we support you? What are the best ways to support you and your journey that you're on?
I think it's maybe not even more so supporting me, but it's just about maybe supporting yourself more. I pride myself on having very high standards for my life in general and what I want to obtain, on how I live my daily life, if that's personal or professionally. So I always want to push others to their fullest potential. As cliche or as maybe corny as that line can be, it just invigorates or inspires other people. And that's the small, like tight circle that I have. It's that we're all killers in our own realm. We're all pushing ourselves to be the best spiritually, mentally, physically, you name it. And that is just going to radiate into other people. You are the sum of your closest couple people in your circle, right? So if you're going to hang out with buckets and losers, what's that going to make you? Same thing, vice versa. If I'm networking or if my friends are all pushing be the best people they are, that's only going to inspire you the most. So I would say the only thing I would ask for is just to really double down on yourself, where personal excellence is the ultimate rebellion. If we are all pushing ourselves to be the best people possible, that's only going to push each other to be the best. And that's why I love playing sports or being parts of teams, because everyone's pushing each other. There's always that level of competition. But I feel that when people talk about competition, it always has this kind of negative light on it. But I look at it as such a beautiful thing, is that like nobody else's success is going to take away from yours. So to actually be there to support them, to clap and cheer them on, one, it's going to do great for yourself and your own mental well-being. But at the same time, that's going to come back to you 10 times over. So it's just that kind of support and that I'm looking for. It's just all I ask is for you guys to push to be the best versions of yourself. And in doing so, that's going to keep me moving forward as well.
That's incredible. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So, a couple final questions. Like I said, the first one is called Wisdom Bites. Okay. So,
Okay.
hypothetical question. Imagine that you are looking and you can envision the capacity of the human brain and understand all of the wisdom that you have amassed to this very point in your life. Just try and sit with that for a moment and say, okay, where have I gathered the most wisdom? And you're looking at it and you're analyzing it on a wall or something in front of you. And now imagine that it's all gone, gone forever. But you had two or three pieces of wisdom that you could tell yourself that you could live by for the rest of your life. What would your two or three wisdom bites be, Imran?
It's a good question. I like that. I'll have to think. One for sure that I live by: when you want to say no, say yes. It's like a powerful notion that's a lot of people have talked about, and maybe another cliche saying, but you live like your best life and your best self is on the other side of fear. There's some things, yeah, okay, I'm not going to maybe put my life at risk by any means, but there's certain growing opportunities personally or professionally that I don't feel comfortable doing. And even up to this point, I've said, you know what? I'll actually do it. I'll say yes and do it. And it's exposed me to some beautiful parts of myself, of my industry, and it's opened up new realms if it's for professional or personal growth. So if there's like definitely one notion, be whenever like your immediate answer is to say no, take a step back, think about why you're saying no, but then just say yes and lean into it. And that's come from, I would say 99% of the things I've found a lot of success in, where I've grown up in the world where mental health was not talked about. So I leaned into that 110%. One for my personal growth, but one to liberate and inspire others to think about that. You think about the food TV shows. I hated being on camera. I hated having my pictures taken. I was never comfortable talking in front of people, cooking in front of people, or being on stages. I hated public speaking in elementary and high school. and now I get paid to do so, and being part of these TV shows, it's just open up those realms. So that's like the notion where normally I would have always said no, but I'm like, you know what, let's just lean into it and say yes. So that would probably be one gem, if you will, that I would leave myself. Yeah, I think that's probably like one of the best ones I can definitely think of, like off the top of my head. There's so many others that will like slowly like pop into my head and stuff, but I feel like that's the biggest one, right? It's just like that what I've just said, but also just going like against the curve or against the grain, if you will, right? Like, and especially if like I was always built that way since a young age. Just because everyone else is doing it doesn't mean that you need to, especially when it comes into your vision for life in general. It's your life. No one else is living with the choices that you make, good and or bad. And then when it comes from taking experience or knowledge or advice from people, like you got to know who to take that really from, right? I'm never going to take advice from people that I don't want to be like. If they don't have the things I want, materialistic or not, why am I going to take advice from them? I'll still listen to what everyone says because you can definitely take little nuggets from them. But at the same time, it's just like I push myself to be in the realms of people I actually want to be like and I aspire to be. And I feel that's probably one of the best ways to do so, to try and actually find or suss out the right people to mix with and to learn from.
It's incredible. Well, thank you for sharing that. So, final question is called the 3 R's question. So, feel free to try and answer the first thing that comes to mind in rapid succession if you'd like. If you don't want to do that, that's fine too, but it's the
I
three
like that.
R's.
Yeah.
Okay. The first R, reflection question number one, is what have you been reflecting on the most in your life?
But I've been reflecting the most in my life. It's hard because it changes a lot, but I would say the most common thing is just the direction, where I've always had a great plan and things have more or less gone well to trajectory of life, personal, professional growth, da da da. As the world has taught us of recent times, even the best laid plans aren't always going to be there to support you, right? So being able to pivot and sometimes just wing it. And as we all get older and as we see, a lot of it is just figuring it out as you go. And there is beauty in that of one sometimes lacking or letting go of control. I've always wanted to exercise control in all things that I do, but there is a beauty of doing so. And I've always thought that was probably one of my strongest suits was the fact that I was able to let go and go with the flow. But until that notion comes into your whole life, it made me really reflect. Okay, maybe I didn't have that kind of strength I thought was as strong as it was, right? So having that kind of notion of just trying to go with the flow a bit more, knowing that you can't really control things, and there's the beauty of it, right? There are certain things you can control in life, and to have full control of that, great. If that's your health, if that's your physical being, whatever it is, have full control over that. But at the same time, have the space to be okay with knowing that you're not going to be able to control certain things. But if you do the right things that you have control over, you can definitely weigh the odds in your favor in those other realms.
Reflection question number two, what do you feel like you're not reflecting on enough?
Hmm. That's interesting because I've had probably more downtime in my life in the last few years than probably ever, especially because of the amount of work I've put in and whatnot. You're just go, go, go. So I've had a lot of time to actually take a step back and reflect on it. So to answer that question is kind of hard because I've had a lot of time to reflect on a lot of different areas of my life. So I feel like I'm at a pretty decent point, at least from my perspective, on what I've been reflecting on. So yeah, I don't know if that's an answer or not, but I feel I'm
That's
at a yeah.
absolutely an answer. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that's great because what you're sharing is that you're in a state of pause a lot. You're in that
Mhm.
state of reflection enough. The final reflection question, R3, what do you feel is something that we could all reflect on more as a society in a collective culture and global space to move us forward together?
So something I talk to or about to a lot of different people, more so out of my line of work, but it's a base skill set that we're taught in kitchens is that every single action you have has a ripple effect, either positive or good. When I'm thinking about it from a culinary standpoint, because that's how I was taught that notion, is that every single thing you do will affect either yourself or someone else positively or negatively if it's putting something back in the same place every single time. So when you know that when you're busy and you're running around, you just know it's going to be there no matter what. Putting things back dirty or clean or leaving the space dirty or clean. It's all those like riddled notions that in a kitchen makes complete sense because you come into your workplace and the people that were working there before and it's left trashy and dirty and blah, blah, blah. You're going to just start off pissed off, and then your work's not going to be the same. Like you're not in that like that great headspace. But if you take that notion into working in a kitchen or into everyday life, it's just like leaving or making sure that every single movement that you have is leaving yourself for better success or leaving other people's for that. It's that whole notion again of that ripple effect, is that think about more about just yourself. And that can be the smallest things in the world, but that's how and maybe it's just because I'm super analytical when it came to my work. I bring that into every notion of my life now, but it's all those little things. So maybe you don't have to be as dialed in, if you will, but it's just those little notions, just like, oh, if I'm gonna do this one thing, how's it going to be for the next person behind me? It's that kind of pay it forward mentality. And it's not like you have to go out of your own way or maybe come at a loss, but like at the same time, can you do something with that action to make someone or yourself stay a little bit better? And it's those little things, and that can be massive things as paying it forward or charitable work, or just little things on how you organize your time and your day-to-day tasks. As I think about that every day when it comes down to working a dinner service, where she's like, as long as everything's in its place and everything is being done right, in a sense where everything is organized and you're all prepped up, everything else should just flow 10 times better. And it's going to be easier for people just to come in and out because that setup is there. So when you think about that in life in general, if you think about all those little things, I'm like, is this going to create a problem for me in the future or someone else? Or is this going to save me time? And when you can save yourself time or save yourself or another person time and a headache, it's going to just open up realms for just better things in general. Less stress, less negativity. And if we do that in just everyday life in general, it's going to be amazing.
That's beautiful, Imrun. Imrun Texeira, thank you so, so much for being a part of this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Absolute honor to reconnect.
Thank you very much for spending time with me on the Reflect On podcast today. If you found this episode enjoyable or inspiring, please share it with those who it may help and leave a positive review so that we can grow together. Until next time, reflect onward and keep moving forward.